Hi, it's Tom. In the last video, where we left the project was we were able to click on this picture box, and it was dynamically adding card box controls to this panel, and it was determining or realigning all of the controls in the panel every time we clicked the picture box. So you can see it was offsetting the, or more correctly saying, it was setting the top property and the left property of each of these controls based on how many controls there were in there. But what we found is as we added a really large number of controls to the card boxes to the panel, the cards started to be a little bit more difficult to read. So what we're going to do in this in this video is every time I enter my mouse pointer over top of my card box control, I want to make the card larger so that it stands out. So I'm going to do this with a combination of two events. Mouse enter, which is when my mouse pointer hovers over the visible part of a card, and mouse leave. So it's when, I shouldn't say hovers, because hovers means I wait for a second, but so as soon as it enters into that area, that's when mouse enter happens, and as soon as the mouse pointer leaves that area, that's when mouse leave happens. So again, what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to make the card bigger so it's easier to see. Now, one of the things I'm going to do, I'm going to use, I think 25 is a good number to use. So I'm going to make it, 25 points taller and 25 points wider every time I enter into the card area. Now, to do that, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the cards, I'm going to push the cards down so that when they get larger, they're not going to just move above the top of the panel. But perhaps we'll see that as we go ahead. All right, so we'll exit out of this and we'll go back to our source code. I'd like to scroll up to the top, and we're going to just add a couple of form level fields. I've got some comments already there to mark off where we're going to define these. The first one is going to be, again, the amount in points that I'm going to enlarge the card box controls by when it says when they're hovered over, but really when we put our mouse pointer over them. So we're going to create a constant integer called pop. And why am I calling it pop? In my mind, when I was running this, it almost looks like the cards sort of pop up. So that's why I called it pop. How much we're going to pop them by is 25 points. The next thing I want to define, again at the form level, is what the size of a regular card box control, like what's the regular size of a card box control. So I've decided that it's 75 wide and 107 tall, and that's strictly based on the actual size of my card box images and what I've set the default size to for card box controls. Those numbers could be different for your project, certainly, but that's what I'm defining as regular size. And I'm defining it as an actual size, which is a structure that's built into the .NET language. So that'll just be easy for me to reset it back to regular size on the mouse leave event when I have that defined as a I've set it as a static. It doesn't need to be different for each card control, right? So or even for each form. All right, so now that we have those two things defined, what we'll do is we'll work on adding the two events. Okay, so as I said, the two events were, I'm going to scroll down to where these should be defined. So there should be a section called Card Box Event Handlers. You can expand that. And you can see I've got a bunch of comments, but we're going to actually flesh these out to full-on event handlers. So the first bit of comments here, it says card box control grow in size when the mouse is over it. And the next one is, if I scroll down, card box control shrinks to regular size when the mouse leaves. So this is the area we're going to be adding our code. All right, so let's get started. All right, so this is going to be a void method. It's going to be called cardbox _ mouse enter is what we're going to call it. And it has the standard parameters for an event handler for this type of control. So I'll open up a brace. It'll start complaining almost right away. And then the closing brace will go just before the summary tag for the next one. So it encapsulates those. There we go. Encapsulates the comments. All right. So the first thing I want to do is I want to convert the sender from object to an actual card box. So create a card box reference called a card box. I'll make it equal to the sender as a card box. All right. Now I need to make sure that that actually worked, because just in case for some unknown reason it's some other type of control that's ended up causing this event handler to happen. So if that's the case, card box would be null. Okay. So if it's not null, then I actually want to, do the stuff. So what is the stuff? The stuff is basically resizing the card box. So again, the card box, or a card box, is a reference to whichever card box actually raised this event. So when I use a card box dot size and I modify it, what that's going to do is it's going to modify the actual control that's sitting in the panel. So I'm going to make that equal to a new size, and that new size is going to be based on the regular size width plus the extra 25, which I think I defined as pop, and the regular size height plus that extra bit, the pop. So the card is actually larger. And then I'm going to move the card to the top edge of the panel. So by doing this, the top, it's actually above the top edge of the panel. So what I want to do is I want to say a card box dot top equals 0. Okay, so that it's going to put it at the top of the card box, or sorry, the panel, and no larger. So we can try running that at this point. Oh, of course, I said go ahead and run it, but it's not going to do anything because although I have that event handler, I haven't actually wired that event to any of these boxes. That was a mistake. So let's deal with that. All right, so I have the event handler. Let's go back up to where we were creating the card boxes in the first place. So this is in pbdeck.click. So we created the card box, and then we added it to the panel. But in between, what we want to do is we want to add that event handler. All right, so if you locate the comment that says wire card box mouse enter for the pop visual effect. So that's where we're going to actually put that line of code. And it's going to be a cardbox.mouse enter. Okay, so that's the actual event plus equals, and then the actual event handler code is what we're going to add. So this is the method that we just defined. Okay, so when the card box raises this event, this is the actual method it's going to use. So let's try that out. It might be a little bit more successful. Okay, so I've got a couple of cards. And you notice as soon as I put the mouse pointer over top, they got bigger. Of course, they don't get smaller, right? So we'll have to fix that. So let's do we'll use mouse leave as the event for making them smaller. We'll scroll back down. Find the comment. For me, it's on line 230. Yours might be slightly off by now, but there's a summary comment that talks about shrinking to regular size when the mouse leaves. That's where we'll code this. So I'm going to call it cardbox mouse leave, and again the standard event handler parameters. And that should encapsulate those 4 comments that came underneath it. Oops. There we go. So similar to before, we want to make sure, or sorry, we want to cast the sender as an actual card box so that we can manipulate it. So I'll use the same, this is why I don't type on the videos all that often. So make a reference to a card box. I'll make it equal to sender as a card box. Again, I want to make sure that that actually works. So if a card box is not equal to null, what do I want to do? And I'm encapsulating those 2 comments there. I want to resize the card back to the regular size. So a card box dot size equals regular size. And then we're going to have to fix how the cards align, but basically what I want to do is if I just leave it like that, the card, well actually I'm going to just leave it like that and we're going to see the effect that it has. So let's go ahead and run that. So this is not modifying the top. Put a couple of cards in there. Oh, and of course I didn't wire yet. That's the second time I've done that. Let's go up and take care of that detail. So I'm back up to the click event, and just like I entered a new handler for mouse enter, we'll do the same thing for mouse leave. So a card box dot mouse mouse leave plus equals card box underscore mouse leave. All right, so let's see if that works. So I add a few cards. I'll add a few more so they overlap a bit. Okay, so that still makes the card bigger. You don't necessarily notice the difference without adjusting the top. Let me complete that, and we'll see it in a little bit clearer what we need to do. All right. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going back to realign cards. So when I'm realigning the cards, I want to take into consideration that the cards could get larger or smaller. So I'm going to take care of that in a couple of different places. One of the places I'm going to take care of it is, for me, it's line 348. It's if there's more than one card, how I'm figuring out the offset. So I want to account for the fact that the card might be a little bit wider than normal in the offset. So I'm going to do that by figuring out the width of the panel minus the width of one card, and then minus again the 25 extra points times 2 that might be on either side of that card. Okay, so that's one of the places where I'm modifying that. The other thing I'm doing is, it's going to be in 2 places, where I'm putting the first card actually down. Instead of making it equal to 0, I actually want that little bit of extra space to be at the top of the panel. So I want to make that equal to the top property for the regular card to be equal to 25, or pop. And then I'm going to do that for every subsequent card as well. So instead of setting the top property to 0 every time, I'm basically setting it to 25 each time. So I'm going to run that again. See where we're at. So now you can see as the cards are going on, there's a bit of space. Instead of at the bottom of the panel, it's at the top of the panel, which is what I want. Because when I go and enter into a card, that's the visual look that I actually want. Now you can actually see when they shrink back down, I've got to make sure I set it back to from 0 to 25. So we'll fix that problem. So I'm looking for the card box, mouse leave, and I want a card box, a crad box, dot top to be made equal to pop again. So let's go ahead and run that and see if that does what we need it to do. So I'll add a bunch of cards. You'll notice now there's a little bit of space on either side. That's to make room for the card getting bigger. Okay, and it really is having that visual look that I was looking for, making the card bigger, but being able to see it entirely. All right. So in this video, we were able to, continuing on from the last video, add some actual controls to a panel dynamically, and we also wired some events to those controls as they were being added. So we're going to continue on that. We're going to add a few other events to those controls as they're being added that will allow us to move them from one panel to the other based on clicking. So we'll do that next.